Now, do you think, I mean, so far as heroes are concerned, because your hero, Philip Marlowe, is a real hero. I mean, he behaves in a heroic fashion. My leading character, James Bond, I never intended to be a hero. I intended him to be a sort of blunt instrument wielded by a government department who would get into bizarre and fantastic situations and more or less shoot his way out of them, get out in one way or another. But of course he's always referred to as my hero, but I don't see him as a hero myself. I think he's on the whole
unattractive man.
You ought to, I know, because then you'd have more, I certainly write about him with more feeling and more kindness, probably.
Well, I think you did in Casino Royale.
Do you?
Yes.
Well, yes, he had some emotions at the end when the girl died, but that...
well, that's all right. A man in his job can't afford tender emotions.
Well, that's what I feel.
He feels them, but he has to quell them.
Yes.
Why do you always have to have a torture scene?
Well, do I always? Yes, let me think now.
Yes,
well, I'll
do.
tell you, well, it may be all right.
Every one that I've read.
No, I agree. I think it's a weakness. On the other hand, you see, I think this so-called hero of mine, he has a good time. He beats the villain, and in the end, he gets the girl, and he serves his government well. Well, in the process of that, he's got to suffer something in return for all this success. And, I mean...
This doesn't look dangerous, does it? But it's killed plenty of men and women. It's made beggars of many and millionaires of a few. Mighty few. The game to be played tonight is for the highest stakes of all.
James Bond has tipper.
I've always heard of you as, the ship.
I'll see you to your room.
I'd rather see you to your room.
And make sure you clean him out.
A man is going to wager his life.
Bond and I on opposite sides of the fence.
It was quite an act.
Not all of it.
Which part of it was true?
That the Chiffre will kill you.
You won't choose tonight.
Mr. Leiter?
It may be that you still have a certain attachment for a young woman by the name of Valerie Mathis.
My life depends upon finding her chick. So by the way does yours.
Pain and killing's part of my job.
Climax presents Casino Royale, a bestseller by Ian Fleming.
Casino Royale was first released on April 13th, 1953. The story of a British secret agent who must play a high-stakes card game against an enemy agent and attempt to clean him out was said to have been inspired by Ian Fleming's own experiences during World War II, along with his own added imagination. Casino Royale quickly became a hit in the UK. A year later, the book hit the US shores. Retitled You Asked For It, and announcing the introduction to tough operator Jimmy Bond. I can't help it, but I always associate the name Jimmy as not being the name of a tough, elegant guy. It's like a little kid name. I don't meet many grown men who call themselves Jimmy. Anyway, the book had less than stellar sales in the US. Oddly enough, the 1955 paperback version of Casino Royale featured an image of the character of James Bond on the cover. It's based on the actor Richard Conte. Movie fans should be familiar with him. He did lots of television and film work.
We're all grateful to Don Corleone for calling this meeting. We all know him as a man of his word.
The way he's drawn here, though, he does look like a Jimmy. That's weird. He's got blonde hair. Ian Fleming always had it in his mind that his James Bond character could be adapted into some thrilling film adventures. Within the first year of its publication, Fleming had sold the rights of Casino Royale to CBS for an episode of Climax, an hour-long dramatic anthology series. They got the rights for the bargain basement price of $1,000. Fleming would later regret this decision, but at the time said he simply needed the money. I would love to know what for. That guy was living the life. That grand probably didn't even last him through the night. At the start of the show, host William Lundigan explains the rules of Baccarat, which of course will figure prominently in the story. It was a good idea since I doubt most viewers would have been familiar with it. I think back then people were mostly playing pinochle and canasta and stuff like that. The show is broken up into 3 acts. Despite some tinkering, overall this version is a pretty faithful adaptation of Fleming's story. It's a 50-minute program, so it's not surprising that some characters got combined or eliminated, and the whole story gets streamlined. But really, it's a pretty good abridged version of the story. When this was made, the James Bond character wasn't the fictional icon he is today. The book was barely out a year, and the second Bond novel, Live and Let Die, had only been released 7 months earlier. I don't think it was apparent yet that 007 would have a continuing series of books, or reach the heights of popularity he would eventually enjoy. Unlike the novel, here James Bond is an American agent who works for Combined Intelligence. He does refer to himself as James Bond, but most of the time characters call him Jimmy. He's played by Barry Nelson.
Still in one piece, but I wouldn't know how.
You were so lucky to miss. Did they try to rob you, sir?
They tried to kill me. Well, I'll never catch him now.
Nelson has those old-fashioned good looks that you see in a lot of the leading men back in the day. They're attractive, strong-looking leads, but they're kind of bland. Nelson doesn't have much charisma. It's not like all the heads will turn when he walks into a room. He starts out pretty stiff on the program. He looks like he's trying way too hard to be cool. But as the show goes on, he starts to hit more of a groove. After an immediate attempt on Bond's life outside the casino, he meets his contact, Clarence Leiter, played by a young Michael Pate, who would go on to a long career of supporting parts. Fans of my superhero series will recall him as the President in The Return of Captain Invincible.
We need you badly, Captain Invincible. We need you now, real badly.
Yeah, he was in that too. Here Bond and Leiter's nationalities are reversed. Leiter works for British Secret Service. Leiter explains the mission. Le Chiffre, the chief Soviet agent in the area and the most dangerous man they have. He's been gambling with Soviet funds and has lost 80 million francs. He's going to attempt to win it back with his remaining money in a game of Baccarat. If he wins, Le Chiffre will be able to continue his villainous work for the Soviets. If he loses, however, he will be retired. Bond must get in the game and attempt to clean him out. It's kind of funny how during this exposition scene, Bond and Leiter put on this act like they're talking about the rules of Baccarat when anyone comes within earshot. Shh, shh. Oh, the object of the game is to get as close to 9 as possible. Okay, he's gone. But again, the scene familiarizes us with the rules of the game. It reinforces the idea this is really secret stuff they're talking about, and no one around can be trusted. And it provides the information about who Le Chiffre is and what Bond must do. Bond then encounters Valerie Mathis and Le Chiffre. Linda Christian is pretty smoking as Valerie, the leading lady. Unlike the novel, where this would be Bond's introduction to Vesper Lynd, here Bond has a past relationship with Valerie. Valerie is working with Le Chiffre and is instructed to warn Bond off from playing the game. Of course, Bond doesn't listen. In Bond's bugged hotel room, Bond and Valerie put on a performance for Le Chiffre to convince him Valerie can be trusted and doesn't have any feelings for Bond. However, Bond and Le Chiffre are both suspicious of Valerie and where exactly her allegiances lie. This is one of those classic spy scenes with Bond getting around the bad guys eavesdropping or watching him. It's a scene that fans will see played out in many Bond films, with some solutions thanks to Q's high-tech gadgets. Here it's pretty simple. You just turn up the radio.
Music lover.
Having Peter Lorre as Le Chiffre was the real casting coup in this. Playing a creepy bad guy by now was second nature to him.
They make me laugh.
I had read once that during the filming he kept forgetting his lines and would just ad-lib his dialogue. I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I would never have known. He's pretty good in this. That's the one thing I have to keep reminding myself when watching this Casino Royale. It was filmed live. These old television shows fascinate me. Obviously television was a new medium and they were still trying to figure out how to make it all work. So a lot of it is clunky and can feel stagey. I picture a guy yelling in the booth, "Get the light on him! Now! Hurry! We can't see him!" The game starts and pretty quickly the pressure is put on Bond. Immediately Bond is informed that if he wins, Valerie will be killed. Does Bond still care for her? Is this enough of a threat for him to lose the game? The game of Baccarat does seem like a pretty random game. It's like Bond says, it's sort of like 21. So while watching it, I always feel it's more of a luck of the draw from the dealer than what the players are doing. It's still entertaining to watch with the cutaways between Bond and Le Chiffre. Lorre throws down his cards dramatically, but it does seem like the dealer has more control of the outcome of the game than the players. I can see why they would change the game to poker in the 2006 version. It just seems like a bit more of an exciting game to watch.
Well, it's very easy. It's a lot like 21. It's mostly luck anyway.
Bond does lose the first round and all his money, but is quickly given additional funds to continue, apparently given to him by Leiter. Rejoining the game, he defeats Le Chiffre and takes home the pot. There are some elements taken right from the book that don't exactly play out as exciting as when I read them. Like before seeing this, I never really considered how silly a cane gun would look if you tried to use it, especially at close range. As a rifle, maybe, but this guy would be better off using a gun in his pocket. It's looking pretty awkward there. It didn't even look much cooler when Valentine used one. But I mean, in 1954, it was probably a pretty exciting gadget to see. Other than Bond's room being bugged, there really isn't much high-tech hardware here. Bond rushes to find Valerie and, as in the book, hides the winning check behind the door number plate of his room. Le Chiffre and his goons corner Bond and Valerie and are determined to find the check. It's revealed that Valerie is working for the French Secret Service and supplied Bond with the additional funds. And that they do care for each other.
Valerie Mathis, agent of the Deuxième Bureau. Huh? Oh, I only found that out today. Of course, you would have died at once, but I thought I hold the thread of your life over this American. Not that he seemed to care. He still put his job first.
He had to.
Naturally, Bond refuses to give up the location of the check. Which brings us to the torture of Bond by Le Chiffre. Although this was primetime television, they do include the torture of Bond. Most of it's done off camera.
See this tool, Mr. Bond? It's a very handy little tool. Serves all sorts of purposes. Oh, my little friend, you remember the one that had a gun that passed for a cane? Oh, he was an expert with these. Unfortunately, he's gone, but I've learned a few of his tricks.
And your imagination fills in the gaps of what Bond is enduring. What are they doing with those pliers? I have to give them credit for having it. There's no way they would have attempted to do a more faithful representation of how Fleming describes the scene in the novel. The 1954 audience would never have been able to handle it. They were just watching The Ray Milland Show or You Bet Your Life. Seeing a guy get his testicles pounded would have given viewers a heart attack.
Here's three lovely little ladies right over here.
Besides, this was plenty to get the point across. Stubborn to the end, Bond refuses to divulge the location of the check. It's a good scene, and Peter Lorre is once again really good in it.
What's the difference? It's a check. The police will trace it to you.
Oh, please, don't worry about that. That's very easy, you see. The story will be that after our little game at the casino we made, and you being such a good sportsman, you turned it over to me. You lost, so therefore you signed the check over to me, huh? That's simple, huh? Now, where's that money?
He's so sadistically sinister as he threatens Bond. As Le Chiffre finds the check, Bond gets untied and overcomes the henchman.
Hey! Oh!
It's not the most complex fight, but, I mean, what can you do? Bond shoots Basil the henchman and Le Chiffre. As Le Chiffre sits, bleeding, Bond holds a gun on him and instructs Valerie to call the police. Fade out. The end. Fini.
See how the game goes, huh? Interesting, huh? You know, suddenly I find a great desire to live. What are you going to do, Mr. Bond, huh? What are you going to do?
That's the most commonly seen version of this Casino Royale. However, there's an additional 90 seconds of footage that usually isn't included in most copies of it. Le Chiffre makes one of those final, desperate attempts at winning that villains typically do. With one of his trusty razor blades, he threatens to kill Valerie, but Bond shoots him dead, and the story ends with Bond making out with his leading lady. It's a much more classic Bond ending. "50 years after Casino Royale aired, Nelson described the experience with the production, saying how he was unaware at the time that James Bond was an Englishman. At that time, no one had ever heard of James Bond. I was scratching my head wondering how to play it. I hadn't read the book or anything like that because it wasn't well known. The worst part of it was that I learned it was to be done live. I thought I was finished with live TV. I was trying to get out of it, actually." He recalled that prior to the broadcast, they were making changes up to the last minute. There was nothing he could do if anything went wrong. He was also frustrated that the 1-hour time constraints of the program eliminated any background information about the character of Bond. His honest assessment of the program was that, at the time, he was very conscious of the fact that there wasn't much to go on, and it was too superficial. Nelson supposedly didn't place much importance on his Bond connection, viewing it more as a trivia question than anything else. Looking at Casino Royale with the perspective of the time it was made, I think it's a pretty good adaptation. The settings are limited to the casino and hotel, and it works fine as this stage play they present. Say they had their choice of adapting any of the Bond novels for this program, if they were all written by this time. I don't think any of them could have been done nearly as well as the way they did Casino Royale here.
I was on my way out to wait for you at the hotel. I'm attached to Station S, British Secret Service. We're working in conjunction with the Deuxième Bureau, and your own chaps have combined intelligence agency in Washington.
Oh, well, it seems that we have a good many friends in common.
Yes, doesn't it?
The changes that were made with Bond being an American agent, I can kind of understand. Or at least, like, the rationales behind those changes. It was an American program, an American audience was going to watch it, so just make him an American agent to placate viewers. Drop the unusual Vesper name and make it Valerie. That doesn't sound so strange. I still don't understand why they just couldn't call him Felix Leiter, though. Is the name Clarence really that much of an improvement? Since watching this program, I always envision Le Chiffre as Peter Lorre. I just can't shake him from the part. Lorre was one of the greatest and most unique character actors ever, and his casting alone in a part was always a memorable addition to any film. Lorre would continue acting, usually playing on the creepy screen presence he was best known for, until his death in 1964. I still think my favorite film of his was his breakthrough role in Fritz Lang's 1931 M. Great movie. Linda Christian, who Life magazine once dubbed the Anatomic Bomb, died in 2011 at the age of 87. The news of her death was accompanied by headlines of her being the first Bond girl. Depending on how you look at it, that's technically true. Ursula Andress probably wouldn't be too happy to lose that title, though. Barry Nelson would continue acting in supporting parts in films and television. He died in 2007, 1 year after Eon Films finally got to make their version of Casino Royale. There are really only two parts I always associate Nelson with. One being the first James Bond, and him being the one to hire Jack Nicholson to look after the Overlook Hotel.
I don't suppose they told you anything in Denver about the tragedy we had up here during the winter of 1970?
I don't believe they did.
This program barely made a splash with the audience. It didn't make everyone crazy for James Bond. It would be 8 years until Cubby Broccoli and Harry Saltzman released Dr. No, and that would really help kickstart Bond's popularity with general audiences. Because of this initial sale of the rights to Casino Royale to CBS, it would end up being the one Bond novel that Broccoli and Saltzman wouldn't have control of, and could never adapt into the film series. Subsequently, the rights to Casino Royale would fall into the hands of producer Charles K. Feldman, who would set about filming his own adaptation of the story in 1967. I always wondered what Fleming's reaction to this version of Casino Royale was, though. He must have seen it, but I never read any of his thoughts about the finished product. It's definitely a worthwhile program for Bond fans to check out. It was pretty much forgotten and lost until a copy of it was discovered in the 1980s. Casual fans might not be interested in it. They probably would just view it as an insignificant footnote in Bond history. It's not exactly very polished, and it can be clunky at times, but overall I think it's a commendable adaptation of Fleming's story.
Aren't you the fellow who was shot?
No, I'm the fellow who was missed.